everybody. Biggie has a plan that may culminate with the showcase of the Immortals. I'm Casualeann. Come with me. So it wouldn't be an episode of Talking Smack without Kayla Braxton asking, however sincerely or insincerely, how Paul Heyman is doing. How is he? He says it's fight week, and so he worries. And he worries because he's Jewish, and that's what his people do, according to him. Roman Reigns does not have to stress because he has Paul Heyman to do it for him. So because of Paul's tendency to talk over or take over, Kayla has deemed a portion of the show, specifically this first segment, as Kayla's Corner. Quote, he can sit there and look pretty. Wow. So she runs down some of the major events from SmackDown. She says that Rey Mysterio triumphed over Dolph Ziggler in singles competition, and she wishes the Mysterios well in their match against the Dirty Dogs for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. So everything with Paul Heyman regarding any sort of positive comment from a woman is about them liking someone. So he determines from her not wishing the tribal chief well in his match that she's crushing on Dominic Mysterio. Sure, why not? To rebuff him, she points out the possible historical significance of the first father-son tag team champions. She talks about Bianca Belair and Bayley fighting for the SmackDown Women's Championship and looking for Paul's input. All of a sudden, he says that he's intrigued. He's not sure who might win of the two, and maybe that wasn't like substantive or definitive enough of a response because Kayla seems a little bit perturbed, and Paul says, Dominic, she can't be satisfied. Run to San Diego. Ridiculous. Segment 2 starts with Natalya and Tamina, the women's tag team champions. And I have to start by saying I absolutely love Natalya's graphic with the spinning pink maple leaf with the heart in the middle. Oh, so cool. They look like champions in this segment, but each themselves, so not like matchy champions. Tamina's in her solid black, and Natalya has her pink leopard print, like catsuit ring gear on. The same ring gear that they competed in supposedly last night or the night before Talking Smack. So ridiculous. I'm sure it was just a coincidence. But each has their title draped over their shoulder. So Kayla asks how satisfying it was to become women's tag team champions. And Natalya notes that Destiny's always chasing and that she knew that one day she would become a women's champion, but she had no idea and she didn't think that they were that they weren't supposed to have these. She has this kind of motivational statement to make, and she says that these titles are proof. They're a message to anyone who thought that their dream was over, anyone who thought that their dream had passed them by, that you have to keep fighting. That was quite touching in that regard. So Tamina, for her part, thanks Natalya for believing in her, and then she thanks her family for sharing her with the WWE Universe and the WWE Universe itself, her dad, the people behind the scenes. Like, she thanks so many different entities, and you can tell that like the emotion coming from both of them is something that's real. It is legit. Natalya's kind of dabbing her eyes. Her makeup is starting to run some. It was just beautiful, and I think it was a smart decision on WWE's part to put the titles on them. Kayla even, deems them locker room leaders. It's a wonderful thing to see, and hopefully it's going to inject a little more life into these titles that have become a bit bogged down over these past months. Kayla, to try to pivot a bit, asks, what do you all have to say about those who might be eyeing your titles? And with that, Natalya places the championships in something of a different light than the way I'd ever seen them. And she describes them as passports, giving the champions access to all of the locales of the company. So Raw, SmackDown, NXT, NXT UK. And that for that she's putting everyone on notice. And that even if, Nia and Shayna return to a rivalry with them, that they'll be happy to entertain them. Oh my goodness, I hope not. I've seen them fight more than I'll ever need to ever again. Please move on to something else. But if they want, the tag team champions are ready for them. But this idea of the titles as dimensional portals, ways in which they can travel from show to show, becoming something of a creative device in that manner, them inserting themselves into the landscape of whatever show they're currently on. I like it. It's intriguing, especially the way that Natalya explains it. And so I'm really hoping, again, that with these new champions, that becomes a device that's used well. But if Nia and Shayna are any indication of how well it may be managed, then just like them, the new women's tag team champions, they may fall victim to this kind of triage, sort of piecemeal booking. So the next segment after a commercial break was with Pat McAfee. Why on earth? Why? Pat McAfee. Pat McAfee is on commentary. Why on earth is he on Talking Smack? Anyway, Kayla runs down his accomplishments, ESPN College Game Day, the Pat McAfee show, but that him being the newest voice on SmackDown is what the company's really excited about. More power to you. I'm not excited about it, but okay. Pat's happy to be there. He says that Michael Cole's lame A has never been on Talking Smack. Okay. And Kayla asks, how does it feel to be on commentary? And snap, like what he said about about Michael Cole just didn't happen. He says he loves working with Michael Cole and that he's living a dream, watching things unfold, remarking on them. I mean, it would have given you whiplash if you hadn't heard it, or if you'd been in the studio. It would have given you whiplash. How quickly he changes from calling him lame to being like, oh yeah, I love to work with him, but that he's made a lot of mistakes. And you can tell that Paul Heyman is like exerting every foreseeable ounce of strength he has to refrain from commenting on all the mistakes he's made. But that he's having a blast. Okay. Of Bianca and Bayley, he says that Bianca is going to win her match. And Paul cuts off Kayla's next question. And, he turns his chair, as he always does. He turns his chair and, makes very direct eye contact with Pat. He says that Pat's show was the first he knew of him because he doesn't watch football because it's predetermined, which was very cute. it's, of course, an interesting play on the nature of professional wrestling because it's also predetermined. But it was a nice rib. But that he's heard about the fact that Pat is complimentary of the head of the table. And that now is his opportunity to acknowledge him. And Pat, says that, hey, he's done that tons of times. He does it all the time. But what Paul means by acknowledge him is different from McAfee's interpretation of it, in that Paul wants Pat to do what he does each week, which is Roman Reigns is going to win. He is going to retain against Cesaro. And McAfee resists doing that. It was an okay segment, but I already hear more of McAfee than I want to on SmackDown. And it pains me to say that because I, alongside the rest of the Pride of West Virginia, used to cheer him on when he played for WVU. But I see and I hear his voice for 2 hours every week. I don't need him in my interview segments too. I just don't. But perhaps the larger, more mainstream audiences or audiences of his shows, maybe they need him too. Maybe that's what the company's banking on. I don't know. We get a commercial break, and the next segment is with Big E. And he comes out with a gigantic gavel. And I don't know if Mr. Heyman has been struck by an errant juror, a rogue judge, but at the sight of Big E's gavel, he is petrified. I'll put the obvious thoughts of fear that come to mind aside and go on. Big E greets everyone and puts his booted feet spread apart on the desk. Now, I know what's coming for this past Monday's episode of Raw Talk, the one that's 2 days ahead of this. And so I'm going to try to not be too harsh with Big E because I know what the New Day did and I know what I'm commenting on. I'm going to try not to be harsh. But the Southern Belle in me was like, where are your manners? Why are your feet on this desk? You are not at home. I know his flexibility is the stuff of legend, how far he can separate his feet. I didn't think this was the time, but sure. And apparently I wasn't the only one. Paul Heyman says, oh, this is like Basic Instinct. And he seems, again, perplexed about Big E being spread eagle across the desk. And he asks if this is when he's supposed to say, nice hammer. Ellipsis. Kayla asks what he thinks about the Intercontinental Championship Fatal 4-Way with he, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, and the champion Apollo Crews. And Big E notes that there needs to be a middle ground between a fatal 4-way and a friendly 4-way, which obviously the match is going to be neither. And of course I think, halfway between a friendly 4-way and a fatal 4-way with some F alliteration, what would that be? A foul 4-way? A faux 4-way? A fiendish 4-way? That could be interesting. A Freudian 4-way? A fiery 4-way? A furious 4-way? The famous feuding Faustian, four-legged, fledgling, flippant, fried fan boat 4-way? I don't know. Big E likens his own momentum to an Uncle Mo, which it took me a while to even parse out what he was saying. But he says that it's like he would like to kiss Uncle Mo on his bald head for luck. But that Commander Aziz and Apollo Crews have run out with Uncle Mo under their arm. And now he can't kiss and rub his head for luck anymore. And Paul Heyman volunteers his bald head silently. Big E actually obliges and then exclaims, "Oh, I'm winning the title now." They never cease to amaze me with this stuff. Big E thanks him for the kiss and states that once he reclaims his momentum, once he reclaims Uncle Mo, he becomes the IC champion again. And his reign extends from a couple of months to a few to several. He fully plans to walk into WrestleMania 2022, face Roman Reigns, and then walk out both the Universal and Intercontinental Champion. Essentially the Seth Rollins 2015 SummerSlam plan, or Kenny Omega, or any other belts collectors. And as Big E is getting later and later into this statement, and Roman's name does come out, Paul Heyman's color drains from his face. It's like some vampire is just below the desk, just going to town on him, super pale. Big E's going further and further and further. He's getting more and more hype. He's going into his full black preacher, community leader, orator on the stoop, wiping the sweat from his brow on a Saturday afternoon type thing. And he's slapping the table like he's super hyped. And when he leaves out, Paul is just completely immobilized, and all he can manage to get out is, "It's glass." That's all he's got. So after that segment, we get a commercial break, and the final one is with Paul Heyman himself. Now, in a turn from the previous week's Talking Smack, in which there was the long preface from Kayla, Paul is already in the solo shot when you come back. And he says that he was asked if he would like to say a few words about the passing of New Jack. He calls him an ECW original. He says that he eschews eulogies when possible, but that when he'd heard the New Jack and Jack had passed away, that he'd hoped he was lying, that he was trying to read his own obituary, that he was trying to sell merch, and that he was going to come out and, have a good laugh about it. And that normally, as part of tribute, when someone passes, a lot of their footage gets shown. But that was something that they couldn't even do because New Jack is a very non-PG performer. Obviously, we're very solidly in the era of PG television when it comes to professional wrestling. But he says he's not a PG performer. He was a gangster among gangsters in ECW. And he kind of concludes it there, and he wishes everyone a most extreme weekend and puts up the gangster sign. It was extremely, no pun intended, a moving, beautiful tribute to the memory of New Jack. And again, because of the kind of controversial figure that he was, you can't get much more than that. And so I thought Paul did extremely, extremely well with it. So for the must-watch segment of the week, I was kind of tied up between which I should select between Paul Heyman and Natalya and Tamina. I'm going to say this time Natalya and Tamina. I've definitely recommended a Paul Heyman final segment at least once before, and we'll probably do it again. Plus, the women's tag team champions, they're really, really good in this episode. This time, Tamina showed passion as opposed to just telling us about it. I say go back and look at it. If you're a bit ambiguous about them, this may be the medicine you seek. For my rating, I thought this was a great show. I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5. with Pat McAfee, I just couldn't bring myself to give it a 5 out of 5. I appreciated the resistance to acknowledging Roman Reigns and not saying, you know, overtly he's going to win. But it was a little illogical because he literally just said that Bianca was going to win her championship match. I mean, if he was resisting because he didn't know for certain, or that was his, you know, commentator character, that he didn't know for certain, he should have just said that. It was just bone dry. It was completely unnecessary for him as a commentator to be a guest on the segment. It was the lone dark spot in an otherwise just flawless and emotionally evocative show. So 4 out of 5. That's all the time that I have for today. I thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Tap that bell icon to make sure that you get notifications for when new videos come out. I'll see you guys soon.